Hello everyone, and welcome to HSE's panel on female representation in OSH. To introduce myself, I am Richard Jeffers, Chief of Staff at the Health and Safety Executive, and I'll be acting as question master and chair of today's panel. So I'd just like to start by thanking the GISHW organisers for the invite to run this panel today and for the opportunity to discuss this important topic. In particular, I'd like to thank Dr. Fujita and Hans-Horst Konkluski, who offered us this opportunity in person. So to set the scene, as the workforce has evolved and continues to evolve, so must the world of occupational safety and health and its leadership. Globally, on average, around 40% of the world's workforce are female, and in many countries this is increasingly close to or more than 50%. So once a male-dominated area, women increasingly play important roles at every level across the wider OSH landscape as engineers, doctors, inspectors, leaders, and more. This panel discussion today will explore how women are increasingly trailblazing, reshaping approaches to health and safety, and how modern leadership can encourage and support this growth. Panelists will discuss their own experiences as leaders and innovators and explore how a progressive approach from industry can bear fruit. So over the course of this session, I'll be putting a series of questions to our panel so we can hear their views on the subject. And now to introduce our panel of experts representing a diverse series of backgrounds, I'm sure we're looking forward to hearing their views as they discuss this topic. So first of all, we have Mrs. Sarah Alban, who is a career civil servant with extensive experience in the justice and insolvency sectors. Sarah took up post as Chief Executive of the Health and Safety Executive, Great Britain's health and safety regulator, in 2019, and has led the organisation through a period of sustained change, including the delivery of a new strategy and operating model. So under Sarah's stewardship, HSE has taken on successfully additional responsibilities, including establishing itself as the chemicals regulator for the wider United Kingdom. Now we have Ms. Nancy Wilk. Nancy is the current president of the International Occupational Hygiene Association. Nancy is also Senior Technical Director, Environmental Health and Safety and Industrial Hygiene with WSP Canada, Mine, Water and Environment, located in Cambridge, Ontario, and has extensive experience in EHS and the comprehensive practice of occupational hygiene since 1986. Next, we have Mr. Mohammed Abdulaziz Abushal. Mohammed is Human Factors Safety Group Leader within the Loss Prevention Technical Services Department at Aramco. Mohammed has over 11 years of experience in incident investigation, human factors, and organizational learning. His career began in operations, process, maintenance, and inspection engineering at various operational facilities within Aramco, and he later transitioned into leadership roles, providing safety support to operational organizations and mega projects. Finally, we have Ms. Jane Lassie. Jane is the Health and Safety Executive's Director of Regulation, and in this capacity, she is directly responsible for leading the work of HSE's regulatory divisions, spanning a wide range of sectors, including major hazards, chemicals, and the offshore extractive industries. Jane has been with HSE for over 30 years, and her career has included leadership roles within HSE's field operations and chemical, explosive, and microbiological hazards divisions. So now we've introduced the panel, we'll go on with the questions. So the first question is for Sarah Alban. So we're here today to talk about women in health and safety. Why, though, would we even debate women as a particular group?
Well, thank you. And I guess this question arises in a number of different contexts, because clearly gender is only one of a sort of series of characteristics which can impact people's ability to have full access in a workplace. But I think the interesting thing about gender is that, as well as the sort of psychosocial impacts of traditional gendered roles within workplaces, which can lead to women not being perceived as appropriate in a leading function or a managerial function, there are also, and this is particularly relevant in the context of health and safety, there are physical differences between men and women, which can significantly impact women's ability to equally access the workplace. And that's not just the fact that typically we women are smaller and less strong musculature than men, although that is true. but we're just not physically the same shape. And the world was designed for a typical, often Western man. And therefore, for women, many of the safety systems don't quite work for our physiology, as well as other things about the sort of our physical nature, our reproductive health and things like that, which need to be really thought about and taken into consideration when designing appropriate PPE or workplace systems. So I think that whilst there are important considerations for all sorts of wider diversity issues in the workplace, we still need to properly discuss gender and the importance of really thinking about women both as leaders and workers in a safe system.
Thank you very much for those comments. So taking that further, Jane, you've been a regulator for a number of years. What's been your experience going into industry?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think first of all, just to reiterate what Sarah says, I just want to say that everyone has an equal right to protection from harm at work, but that doesn't mean to say everyone needs to be treated as if they're exactly the same. So I think we just have to remember that, whether it's a gender issue or otherwise. I think for me, just reflecting on my experience I first sort of went into the workplace in 1991 as an inspector. So there's something about my experience as an inspector going into industry and industrial environments and observing around me the women that were in those environments and what the experience was for them. For me, I think, 30 odd years ago, things as an inspector, I was offered not necessarily getting the right size of personal protective equipment that I needed, but also the range of equipment that I was offered in those days. I also remember I was inspecting engineering and heavier industry and the chemical industry. And I remember the offer of footwear for me was I could choose between some high-heeled safety shoes, which I thought wasn't really necessarily relevant. And when I wanted boots, I couldn't get them in the right size. And that was not just for me as an inspector and the whole range of PPE, but for the people, the few women that were working in those environments. I think the other thing for me is we need to remember, depending on the age of females, in particular women who are of childbearing age, then there are risks, additional risks in the workplace that not everybody appreciates. So whether that's exposure to chemicals, whether that's exposure to lead, ionizing radiation, other things. There's a whole range of factors there that need to be taken into account. And again, as an inspector in the major hazards chemical industry, I remember at the age of 29 when I first found out I was pregnant, and I was not wanting to tell anybody at work for lots of reasons at that stage, but I was inspecting a large-scale chemical manufacturer's premises, and I had to not only talk to them about my pregnancy because I needed to make them aware so that I wasn't going into areas that I shouldn't. It was also quite awkward for me because I also had to have the conversation to say, by the way, I'm telling you because in order to protect myself, I need to tell you, but I haven't even told my boss about this yet. So that was quite an interesting experience for me. So all I would say is we just need to think about a whole range of issues that affect women and make sure that and in those days, 30 odd years ago, it was not as easy to talk about those experiences openly with colleagues at work or indeed with some of the duty holders that I was inspecting. So for me, as somebody in that situation as well, just finally, it made me really reflect at that time on female workers in the workplace who weren't in possession of a warrant and doing a regulatory job like I was, how difficult it was for some of those women, not even those women who'd got into that environment, to actually talk about it at work.
Okay, thank you very much, Jane, for sharing your experiences there. So picking up on that, Nancy, you work in the mining sector. So what are some of the current barriers for women in mining with regards to attracting them to the sector, as well as their retention?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So there's an excellent intergovernmental forum study that I typically refer to when I speak to diversity, equity, and inclusion and supporting women in mining. And I will refer to it as the IGF, so Intergovernmental Forum report. It's a longitudinal study of 12 countries, one of which is participating is Canada, so the country that I live in. And their most recent report, the second of the third, reports on women in the mine of the future. And one of the first barriers is just the nature of the culture. It is one of the most heavily masculinized cultures when looking across all sectors. And an ILO report of that, in that regard in 2021 would support that when looking at gender balance and the distribution of gender. Of 21.4 million workers, 85% of those were men. So this is something that leads to a culture where in as recent as 2022, a large mining company report described their workplace culture as using these descriptors, sexual harassment, bullying, and racism. So unfortunately, there's a very dark side to women in mining, and this barrier needs to be overcome. However, as gender balance improves, we know that women's needs are then more provided for in the workplace because of their increased presence. And these needs need to include protection from psychological harm. So other barriers that the IGF report highlights to attracting and retaining women in mining, we actually see the numbers or the percent around gender balance fluctuate. Because women are attracted to the sector, but then as their needs are not met, they quickly leave. So this is also an issue. So some of these barriers include mining's boom and bust cyclical culture. It tends to impact women more than men and results in the loss of jobs and livelihoods. So in some of the local communities where mines are present, mining's often the largest employer, if not the only formal employer. So the sector offers direct and indirect mining jobs for women in these communities. And so their presence in those workplaces or in the supply chains, it's very critical to their economic empowerment. Facilities at mine sites are not conducive for women's employment. Specifically the fly-in, fly-out, or what we call the FIFO model mine sites located in remote areas. They're not adapted to the needs of women. And strategies and corporate measures are lacking to meet things such as basic needs for personal protective equipment, safe and separate sanitation facilities, and gender-appropriate health services. Women generally in mining are underrepresented at every level of the organization, whether that's professional, managerial, or leadership. Women find it hard to obtain mining-specific skills and education, and they often have less on-the-job training and apprenticeship opportunities than men. And certainly, one of the barriers that IGF speaks to is that women in science, technology, engineering, and math, so the STEM areas, prefer other industries over mining. And then women are leaving mining due to the type of work, non-inclusive environments, unsupported parenting, and lack of growth. I will reference here a study coming out of the UK by the British Occupational Hygiene Society in 2023, reporting an urgent need for measures to protect women from becoming ill due to their work. And it highlights that women often bear more of the burden of occupational illnesses related to their work. This aligns with what we see in mining. Generally, one of the issues is that there's a real lack of research standards and guidance to occupational health hazards and exposures that impact women in not just in mining, but in all sectors. And this is largely due to the fact that occupational health research is based on reference men, someone that's male, 25 to 30 years old, 70 kilos, and Caucasian, doesn't represent women nor most of humanity. And the other issue, Jane just spoke to it, is a barrier, is the area of reproductive health and the seasons that women go through in their life. There's just not the support there, including, again, a lack of research standards and guidance with regards to occupational exposures during pregnancy. And I do want to highlight, there's also issues for reproductive hazards for men as well, but women is our topic today. If anyone's interested in that, I'm happy to share the resources with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. So Mohammed, Aramco have made great efforts to ensure women in the organisation can play a full role in a wide range of fields. Could you expand and tell us a little more about the things you've done as a company?
So definitely, thank you, Richard. So I'll start with the fact that most people don't realize that health and safety jobs brought the STEM careers for women in Aramco, science, technology, engineering, and math jobs. I'd like to start with a story that goes back to 60 years. So a lady named Najat al-Hussein, what that lady did is basically she was the first female engineer, a female scientist hired by Aramco. And what Najat did is basically she helped stopping or eradicating diseases like smallpox and malaria by providing or working on vaccination programs for children in neighboring communities. So fast forward, there are so many women in the company that carried Najat's torch, and basically now she paved the way for all the women in Aramco working in health and safety sector. And if we're about to hold this, if we held this session 10 years ago, we'll be talking about, speaking for Aramco, we'll be talking about issues related to the design of the facilities that cannot accommodate female workers. We'll be talking about the remoteness of the jobs, the remoteness of the work locations that most of our esteemed panelists has just mentioned. We'll be talking about the legal restrictions, especially in Saudi Arabia, when it comes to driving, and which prohibits women from driving and doing and attending to their basic daily needs, and also the misconception of safety profession as an unattractive job or a career for females. But the landscape has changed, and it changed fast. And nowadays, we've started seeing more female workers joining the workforce of health and safety in the company. So I'd like to talk about some statistics. So in just 5 years, we started to see a growth and increase of female representation in the safety sector by 144%. And now women work in operationally remote locations, and we learned a lot from so many global initiatives like the operations in the North Sea and the North Slope, and that helped us a lot in speeding up the infrastructure build and infrastructure modification for our facilities to accommodate female women in health and safety, as well as operations and maintenance and engineering as well.
Thank you very much. So I think now we'll move on to a discussion around leadership as our focus here. So Sarah, if you could start by saying, as a senior leader, what challenges have you faced personally in reaching that position?
Well, I don't think we'll have time to cover all of them over the many years or decades that I've been working, but I was really struck there when Mohammed referenced the speed of change. And although our countries are different and we've had different challenges, I think I've also seen a really rapid change in the expectation and place of women in the corporate world and in companies and in government. So, I mean, when I first joined the UK civil service, I still heard regular conversations amongst my peers discussing whether or not, for example, they would ever be prepared to work for a woman. And, you know, it was relatively common that people would say, well, you know, so-and-so isn't happy. Well, I'm not surprised. Look, he's got a woman boss. Would you ever work for a woman? It was as if we might have, I don't know, an entirely different species with the weirdness of women. Nobody could possibly be expected to work for us. Probably for them bad enough that they were having to work with us. And so I suppose just by coincidence of my age and going through, one of the things that I've always had to deal with is being in a relatively senior position where people didn't expect me to be. So whether that was in one role where I was actually the boss in an office, but also the only woman and relatively young And so visitors just assumed that I was the secretary and would wander up to me and ask for a cup of tea as their introduction. By the way, I used to mostly just make them a cup of tea without saying anything and then watch their faces when they were shown into the meeting that I was hosting. Through to, I think, just more overt stuff about, just not getting jobs or being told that a particular job wasn't really suitable for you, or a general expectation, which I think you then started to slightly put on yourself. And I think that's probably the most harmful thing, is if you live and work in a culture where all around you people say this kind of job isn't for you, at least part of you believes it. And so maybe you don't quite aspire in the same way as some of your male colleagues, don't apply for promotions quite as early in your career as they do, don't put yourself out perhaps in that sort of, could I do the job? I mean, it's a very commonplace sort of assumption that, if a man and a woman both look at a job description and a woman thinks, well, there's 20% of that job that I can't do, so I better not apply for it. A male colleague might look at it and think, well, there's 20% of the job I can do, so I'm sure I can learn the rest. And so I think a lot of those kind of things can be actually a brake that we've put on ourselves. One of the things which I hope is changing for some of now my younger colleagues who join, I have very, very few senior female role models. And actually they were quite disparaged by a lot of my male colleagues when I was a young woman aspiring to sort of get on with my career. It has rapidly changed, I think. There are a lot more of us in senior positions. It's a lot more common. There may or may not be people who still think they wouldn't want to work for a woman, but they certainly wouldn't just freely express it, I think, in a work environment. So things really have changed, and hopefully for the next generation coming through, some of those expectations and sort of self-limitations won't apply. I guess I've stuck there just to the kind of the psychosocial end of it. At a different time, I could have also talked about some of the casual, more physical sexism that I think as well most of the women of my kind of generation would have faced in the workplace. But I'll leave it there.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing those experiences with us. Jane, then, over the past 34 years with the Health and Safety Executive, what changes have you seen both in your own organisation and the industries that you've regulated in supporting women into the workplace and leadership roles?
Yeah, well, I'll start by just picking up where Sarah didn't elaborate on really the attitude and some of the comments that were probably made to me routinely when I first joined HSE, not just within HSE, but in particular in the industries that I went to. And I always feel that obviously women shouldn't have to tolerate inappropriate sexual or discriminatory remarks by others, and I think that's accepted widely now. I think 34 years ago, that wasn't something that was really people felt was important. And so for me, both in the workplace and in the environments where I used to inspect, it was routine for sexist comments to be made to me, about me, around me. I think I was quite a robust individual. And if you think about the power balance, somebody as a regulator going to a workplace where, as I say, I had a warrant, I could be there. So in a way, I had the power. I had some power. So for me, that together probably with my personality, I was quite robust. I just was able to deal with it. But if you think about that, for not everybody has got the same personality type, not everybody is carrying a warrant. For those women in the workplace 34 years ago, I think it was very, very difficult. And indeed, I had many occasions when I would go into factories, and I remember one particular occasion where I was having a discussion around the standards of control in the workplace. I had a long discussion with the managing director of the company. It was quite difficult because I was taking enforcement. Kept on arguing with me for quite some time, and at the end of the visit I left and took the enforcement that I needed to take, and the next day a bunch of flowers arrived in the office and with a request to go on a date. And I was so upset. And some of my male workers, not upset, I was concerned. My male workers couldn't understand why I would find that really difficult. And partly it was because I recognised the fact that I wasn't being treated as a professional. I had also no idea that that was going on in that situation. I thought I was doing a professional job. So I think there are challenges, or were significant challenges in the workplace all those years ago. I think that has changed. I don't think people would be they may be thinking things, but they wouldn't say what they did in those days. But I think for me as well, the other area that was significantly changed, and Sarah touched on it, I joined an organisation where I was one of only a handful of female inspectors. I was inspecting engineering, foundries, quite heavy industry, and there were even less women in those places. And for me, certainly in terms of leadership, I looked at businesses and saw very few women there, but also in HSE, there were very few role models for me in senior positions. However, and I think it's really important to say the thing that I feel really supported by in the organisation was it was because of the lack of women in the organisation, there were a number of male colleagues who were absolute advocates for me and for the other few women in the organisation. And what that taught me was actually, and that was the best support I could have got, that they recognised something in me that I needed that support for. So it sort of in reflection, I think we're in a much better place, both as, 34 years later, I now see, yes, I'm lucky enough to be in a senior leadership position. I have female peers and bosses, Sarah being one of them, that actually I can see that there is, and hopefully for the women in the organisation, they can see that we have got a place, because all I think that most people want is the feeling of belonging, and you should feel that belonging from the way that you are treated, the way that you are supported. It shouldn't be about your own confidence or your own robustness. So for me, I think that leadership for all of us, whether you are men or a woman in an organisation, is that we support others and support everybody, and try our best to give certainly opportunities, because the opportunities I've had is through the support of colleagues around me throughout the years. And I think we just need to remember that, whether, especially as women, it's really important to me that it's not just women who support women in the organisation, it's our male colleagues. And I actually see some of that from colleagues, especially in HSE. There are male colleagues who are at the forefront of supporting gender equality, and I think that's been really helpful, and continues to be so.
Thank you, Jane, for sharing those details with us. So, Nancy, what are some of the opportunities for organisations and sectors to improve in the representation of women, including women in leadership in their respective workplaces?
Yeah, so great comments here, by the way, and would love to just add to those at some point. I think from a very high level, it's important that organizations stay the course, that within their governance systems, commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion need to remain. And it's very important right now, as we see in very specific geographies around the globe, there's a shift and a pullback, but we need to lean in. And for the reason that Jane just mentioned, it's important that people are included and they feel that they belong, because we know that belonging impacts mental health, and mental health, physical health. So that's super important. And while those commitments are expressed in policy, it's important that they're embedded in management systems, as well as in the work and the daily activity, the interaction throughout the organization. So just like other things that we value, when we embed them and we walk them and we role model them, we need to do that with diversity. And the other, or a key part of that, is training for people at every level. So helping them understand how they do embed it. I also think that on a very practical level, as we have meetings, we often open meetings with health and safety shares. We can open it with a diversity and inclusion share, which can be really powerful. Another way to do this is, or to support women in any sector, is to partner with groups that are focused on equipping and training women so that we set them up for success. And so again, I'll use the example of the mining sector. There's a number of trades groups throughout the jurisdiction that I live in, and their focus is providing women with training and skills so that they compete and that they can be successful in the jobs that they are successful at winning. And then another key part goes back to the need for research and research leading to standards and guidance, so that we're able to verify, establish that women can stay safe, work safe, be healthy, thrive within a workplace. So there's opportunities there to partner with sectoral associations as well as research institutes and universities. An example that I'll give you, Vale Base Metals, a large mining company across Canada and globally. One of their sites partners with their trade union to set aside financial resources each year and work with the university of their choice to research health-related topics to the mining sector. So they've been very, very successful at looking at mental health in miners across Canada, and certainly, you know, some examples that they could look at is reproductive health for women and just occupational health hazards and exposures for women.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Mohammed, so focusing now on Aramco, I actually had the honour a couple of years ago to visit your Women of Impact conference, so we heard firsthand some of the stories of your leaders. So we know you are really committed to supporting women in leadership. Can you tell us more about that?
Definitely, but if you allow me, I'd like to go back one step to emphasize more on a topic that the majority of us talked about.
Yes.
Is basically PPE, and working in the oil and gas industry, and then I'll be coming back to your question, if that's okay.
That's fine.
So we did something in Aramco, but given the fact that most oil and gas facilities mandate the wear of a special garment or a special clothing called flame-resistant clothing. And the same goes for any industry and any job that mandates the wear of a special uniform or special gear in order to perform the job. And also to support and address one of the root causes that impact diversity and inclusion at the work environment and the oil and gas industry is we had to be innovative. And we came up with flame-resistant clothing tailored for females and also appreciates the cultural norms in Saudi Arabia as well. So that specially designed FRC, or flame-resistant clothing, that's been designed for females, gives them the opportunity, supported them to go out to the field, be in facilities, and not limit their participation in the jobs and being in the company for office-based works. But basically now they can go out in the field. We can have engineers being in facilities, serving as process engineers or maintenance engineers, and the same goes for the different disciplines. And it's worth to mention that we got the US patent and recognition by the Institute of Chemical Engineers on that flame-resistant clothing, the specially designed one, for promoting inclusion. So these innovations made it easier and safer for women to thrive in frontline safety roles. And going back to your question, and specifically to the panel that we had as part of the forum that we held, where we had a panel discussion about Women of Impact Forum. And we had Sarah joining us and talking there as well and sharing her experience and leadership, also experience about driving that in Aramco and in the industry as well. So one of the things that we have done, and this goes beyond Aramco, it goes and aligns with the Saudi Arabia Vision 2030, if you heard about it. It's a transformational kind of program for the company to speed up the improvement of so many sectors. So we have developed what's called a diploma for construction workers as well as for safety professions as well. And this diploma is offered for both male and female workers in the oil and gas sector. In addition to that, we continue to hold professional platforms, professional events to pave the way and provide a channel for female workers as well as all workers of all genders to come and join, share experiences with SMEs, with leaders, and talk about all the different aspects that can support them in performing their job and thriving in their career and progressing even further in their careers as well. So we do have so many programs in addition to the national diploma. We do have specialist development programs where those programs are provided for female workers as well as male workers, and it helps them to pick a discipline and then pursue that, go through all the requirements that are mandated in that specific discipline, being it in safety, being it in engineering, being it in operations. So those programs will basically help them develop throughout the years and become subject matter experts in their chosen field. And the same goes for leadership. We do have so many programs that are offered for all genders in the company. And those programs will basically help develop young generations in becoming the future leaders of the company.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. So, focusing now on a different subject, Sarah. So, perhaps the question for you is, what next? Is there more to do, and how can we build upon the improvements of recent years? What challenges remain in reaching equality between men and women?
Well, thank you. I mean, I think there's a lot still to do, although, as I think we've heard, we've all come a long way as well. I mean, there are some that are outside the immediate scope of health and safety, but they are basic and important in the UK, and I think this would be true probably in most countries around the world. Women typically still earn less than men, and that pay gap is really important. But clearly, we as health and safety professionals can't address everything. So to think about some more things in our own area, I think one thing that is really important is to open our eyes to learn from good practice around the world and to, steal each other's ideas boldly. I'm sure there are some things that the UK has done well, but as we've heard, there are some things that, frankly, Saudi Arabia in some areas has done better than us. At least Aramco has, in the really thinking about what PPE women both need to be safe, to be still sufficiently unrestricted that they can physically do the job that they need to do, but also that will make them feel truly comfortable at work within their own cultural preferences. And in addition, as you were saying, tailored to fit their bodies, their shapes. When I joined HSE, it was the first time I'd really become conscious of the fact that although there is safety equipment marketed for women in the UK on commercial sites, mostly it's for women because it's pink, because obviously it's more important for us that we wear pink and that we wear something that truly gives us support and comfort for our feet all day. There are pieces of equipment made available as well that are properly sized for women, but the choice for us in the UK certainly is still so much less than the choice available for our male colleagues. So there are some things that I think we can look right around the world to think about doing that are not that difficult to do. They're really quite basic. But then touching on some of the things that we've heard from other panelists, really thinking about how do we support women through all of their stages in life cycle, through both their reproductive years, but also menopause, to understand that there are sort of physiological differences between men and women that occur at different times that really require support if you're going to get the best from your workforce. We know that if people are distracted at work, uncomfortable, unwell, thinking about other things, they won't be as safe. So providing that basic care for people, but in particular in this context for women throughout their different cycles in their life, is an important part about keeping women safe at work. And of course, if you're relying on a complex system of work, you need the women and the men to be performing at their best to keep both of them safe. And then I suppose things like this, just talking about it. We talked a little bit about what it would have been like 35 years ago, and Jane reflected on some of that. And when we come to you, I think you may want to do the same, Nancy. But you couldn't have had a talk like this, for one thing. You wouldn't have been able to have or be welcome to have a very open discussion. And so one of the things which I think we've made a lot of progress on, but need to continue to do that, is to really hear women's voices and hear from them about what they need in order to work safely and comfortably and well in the modern workplace.
Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. So actually, Jane, same question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree we've come a long way, but I think there are still challenges. Probably one of the main things I think I mentioned earlier, some of the vulnerabilities of certain women, depending on where they are in their life, and some of the hazards and exposures to chemicals and other things that can be really for men and women, but in particular for women, especially if they're childbearing age or pregnant. Some of those things that I think about probably 15, 20 years ago, certainly in the UK, when we introduced legislation around that, there was lots of discussion about it. And I sort of think some of those basic things now people have stopped talking about. And I just worry that in some of the more, although we haven't got as many people in those more traditional industries and manufacturing, actually I worry that some of that is lost, not just generally in terms of ill health and exposures to all people in those working environments, but in particular for women. So I sort of think we sort of have to go back to some of the fundamentals and just keep reminding people that needs to be thought about. And then I think really just to say, I think there's still challenges and in respect to I think we said about making people feel like they belong. If we've got, certainly in the UK, over 50% of the available workforce is women, we want to do everything not just to attract them into a whole range of all industries, but also, it's like you said, it's also about retaining them. And if people don't feel, people will vote with their feet and will move on if they're not made to feel welcome. And I just think that's something that we need to just make sure that all organisations, especially those that we work for, do that, but also try and influence all those industries. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jane. So Nancy, same question for you.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go back and comment on a couple things. First of all, don't like pink. And the other piece is, I entered the field of occupational hygiene as an enforcement officer as well for the jurisdiction that I lived in Canada. And I did that for the first 10 years of my career. It was 1987. It was very often the situation where I was the only woman in the room, whether I was at the office or out at, a coke oven or manufacturing facility, wherever I was. And so a couple of things. I was very fortunate. I grew up in a military family. I have 4 older brothers. And so I was okay with some of the attitudes. I didn't like it, but I was kind of used to that, why are you here? What have you done so that you deserve to be here? But I became very aware of the difficulty that other women were having. And to this point, I think that for us to really move ahead, we need to continue to come alongside people, and I will say women, and also just diversity, those that, maybe are struggling with feeling like they belong. And I think some of the best coaching we can do is remind yourself of the facts. You've earned your position here. Someone's put confidence in you to give you this role. Step into it. And if you need help, I'm here. And it's great to hear that you had the champions around you. I think we can all champion other people. A couple other critical things that I think need to happen. As organizations address their policies, also under their health and safety policy, they need to address health services for women. And so it's important that this is taken into consideration in planning and programs. And so facilities at workplaces, regardless of the sector, they need to provide for women's needs. And they need to also, at remote sites, those types of sectors, making sure that there's appropriate healthcare, medical services, emergency services for women. And I'll tell you a little bit of a story. So in the last couple of years, myself and my team, we've been doing a lot of work in supporting women in mining, DE&I, and reproductive hazards. And as we were preparing for different presentations, a woman at a site explained to us that she had had a miscarriage at a fly-in, fly-out site, and they were not able to give her the assistance that she needed, and she had to be airlifted out. And when someone's in that situation, they have to receive appropriate care, and it has to happen immediately. And this just added to the stress and the ongoing stress of requiring that service, because just like we don't want to wear pink, we don't want to stand out in that we need special treatment, right? However, there are realities with having women within our workforce. So I think it's really important that there are appropriate first aid medical services, especially where we're sending people to remote locations. They could be in the early stages of pregnancy, and often it's not disclosed when it's early stages to anyone. And so situations do arise. So.
Thank you very much, Nancy. So, Mohammed, for you, the same question, please.
Yes, definitely. So I'd like also to comment on a couple of the things that mentioned by my colleagues here. So one of the things is one of the challenges that not oil and gas in particular, but also different sectors or organizations that are male dominant and they have male dominant jobs. So, and then you try to foster diversity and inclusion in those organizations or sectors. So what we have done, it was some sort of a bold move in Aramco, is basically we allocated 50% of our hiring to females in the company. And the same goes for all different professions within the company, not only health and safety. And also the company has set KPIs, along with the safety performance KPIs or HSE, health, safety and environment KPIs that most organizations or oil and gas companies set. We've set KPIs to monitor the number of female employees in the company, and also to monitor the number of positions given, leadership positions given to female leaders. And those KPIs are being looked at by the company CEO, and as well as executives within the company as well. So along with the programs that are in place that are offered for everybody in the company, so the company continues to invest a lot, not only in the development and training courses and the development programs. We also recently started to invest a lot in the safety culture and the culture of the company as well when it comes to having psychologically safe work environment. And myself and my team, we worked on that. It was a big project that we worked on, where we basically assist the safety culture within the company. One of the aspects that we assist is basically how psychologically safe how our work environments are psychologically safe. So basically, we looked at different aspects within the culture of the company, and one of them, and this is something that we started promoting right after the assessment, is promoting a psychologically safe work environment for not only female workers in particular, but for all workers, operators and technicians. Those are the people are mostly suffering a lot from having I would say a less psychologically safe work environment where they cannot speak up, they cannot be transparent, they'll be blamed all the time for all the mistakes that occur at the job or at the site or a specific site. So this is one of the things that we started doing, and we started investing a lot. We started also looking into the different jobs, and we're looking at the human, and I think we learned a lot from Japan here when it comes to human-machine interface. So not necessarily that if the job or if the machine or if that specific job role fits females, it's also we look into, does it fit the human? Is it safe? Does it make less or make the worker less prone to error when they interact with that piece of machinery or equipment? So There are lots of areas that need improvement, not only in the oil and gas sector, but I believe in all industries, manufacturing, maybe health has been advanced, or it is way advanced than the oil and gas industry. But we're investing. These are one of the things and one of the efforts that the company is basically doing, and we continue to invest a lot in those areas.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mohammed. Before I ask the audience if they've got any questions, I just want to confirm the panel are content. They have no more comments for each other, having heard the answers. Okay then, so just at this point, opportunity for those in the audience, if you'd like to ask a question. Yes, please. Yes, we have these microphones here, yes. Thank you.
First off, I just want to say thank you for being pioneers, because it wasn't easy, it was hard, so I think thank you. Secondly, if I can, I don't think if I was a woman, I'm going to make a statement here, that I would be happy if I got a job because I was a statistic. I'd want to get the job because I merited the job. So I think we need to be careful, if I can, with all those kind of discussions. Looking forward, our biggest problem is the number of women coming through universities and STEMs. I think we're averaging about 21, 22, 27% worldwide. That needs to change. So what are your ideas of how we can make real change so the leadership comes through in the future? That's the question.
Great question. Thanks, Malcolm. I think we need to reach women earlier, like way earlier, like girls. And so one of the issues, and I'll just step back. So from a sustainability perspective, mining needs women in their workforce because they need a robust human capital to accomplish what they need to accomplish in terms of production and meeting the needs to do things sustainably and transition to a green economy. They need that robust workforce. So in order to meet that, and they've set very high goals, and some mines actually have achieved gender balance. They don't sustain it, but they have achieved it from time to time. BHP, Saskatchewan, Jansen Potash Mines, an example, I think, a couple years ago. But in reaching women and girls, we need to talk about why we like doing what we're doing. Like, make it fun. Like, I really enjoy working in mining. And we find the same with our profession of occupational hygiene. We need to glam it up a bit and make it attractive to people. And that's as simple as it is in reaching them.
So, I think that was a really interesting and provocative question. And I completely get where you're coming from in saying, would you want to get the job just because we needed to get to a certain percentage of women? And I guess on that individual level, I'm sure I would speak for most people to say that, no, you want to know you've got a job because you deserve the job. But I think at a macro level, as opposed to the individual choice, sometimes having those broader targets and numbers can help, actually, because it can prompt a company to say, well, why not? And where are the people? And why aren't they applying? And why don't I get to the level that I'm aspiring to get to? Why am I not getting the candidates of the right quality that I want to get? And I think, although I agree with you, and I agree with Nancy as well, that we need to find ways of really encouraging girls right from the sort of, the earliest stages in their life and education to feel that they can aspire to do anything in which they're interested and talented rather than feeling constrained by particular gender roles. I would also counsel against too much looking only to saying, well, what do the younger workforce look through? Well, they're bound to get through in the end. As Richard mentioned at the beginning, my background working in the UK government, most of my career I spent in the justice sector. And for many, many years, I heard a conversation which went, why aren't there enough women senior judges? Why have we got almost no members of the judiciary, or actually for quite a bit of it, no members of the judiciary on the Supreme Court, on the highest court? And the answer always from the brackets men in the legal profession is, well, don't worry, we've got nearly 50-50 now, women and male graduates in law, so that they'll come through. We don't need to do anything. And yet they never did come through. They graduated, they maybe went into practice, and in a culture which didn't welcome them, didn't make it easy for them to get the most challenging, interesting jobs, they dropped out again as well. So I think it is really important that we have that equality of aspiration, that we have an equality of education. But I suppose my answer is it's not enough. If you do that alone, it won't magically solve itself over the next 20, 30, 40 years. So we do need to keep thinking proactively. Wherever there's any underrepresented group, how do we reach into the group to make the best of it, to make the best of them? And I suppose the other thing, if I think about one thing I didn't remember to say, is this isn't all about for the benefit of women. I mean, it is clearly for the benefit of women, but it's for the benefit of the companies that employ people. It's for the benefit of the economies that need to grow. 50% roughly of your population is female. It's a really foolish country or company or organization that almost automatically denies itself access to 50% of the talent because it just hasn't thought properly about how to make women feel comfortable, fulfilled, and giving their best in a work environment.
So I'll talk about it from a different perspective. So right now I'm pursuing a master's degree in one of the universities, and then in process safety engineering. But going back to your question, and also that ties to the transformation program that we have in the country to achieve by the year 2030. One of the byproducts for that transformation program is that one of the universities was a male-dominant university, and females were not allowed to even apply to that university. And that university is it was even ranked as the #1 university in the country when it comes to STEM majors, science, technology, engineering, and it was mainly focusing on engineering disciplines. So now it's been opened up for all genders, especially females. And then they set a specific percentage for the admission for females, and then they said, let's start with a certain percentage, and then they moved it to up to 50%. And then they opened it up for everybody. And then they're basically using some sort of a cumulative percentage based on your high school grades and based on certain specific exams that you need to take before applying to the university. So, and I think this is a credit that goes to all female students, is that they're better than us as males when it comes to studying and being good and scoring high. So they ended up with high scores, high cumulative score, or high cumulative percentage. And then, so they got the higher percentage, and they got the higher percentage of being administered or being admitted to that university. And then males, I was talking to males and colleagues, and then they were actually afraid of the future. They're saying that now this is one of the promising, I mean, well, basically being admitted to that specific university gives you a higher chance of getting jobs at well-respected companies in the country. But now we lost that opportunity because we will never be able to compete with female students. And actually, we're talking, I was basically in an Uber and then heading to the airport. And I was in a completely different city, a city that is far away, like around 1,200 kilometers from that city where that university is located at. And then somebody was telling me, so I just finished high school, and then I went through all those exams, and then now my cumulative percentage or admission percentage is low enough to get me into that university. What should I do? I mean, where should I go? And I looked at him, and I was like, well, I don't have an answer for that, and I don't have a solution for it. It's just study hard, and then good luck.
Yeah, I'll just say, again, great question. And I think I would just really echoing what Sarah said, but just say, I absolutely want to get a job because I'm the right person and the best person for the job. But sometimes I think it is about asking the questions why there is such a misalignment between the numbers of females that are going through a process of applications and maybe they're not getting through. We need to ask those questions. What is happening there? And certainly we'd be doing that if it was the other way around. Interestingly enough, my background was, I did a degree in chemistry and biochemistry, but it was only really the sexism of teachers in my school that led me to that, really, because they were so surprised that a woman could do well at chemistry that they really encouraged me, perversely. So I always look back on that and think, if they hadn't have, it was because I stood out as far as they were concerned. There were probably plenty of other people who also could have succeeded there that were women, but that was interesting in itself. But what more can we do? I think STEM subjects across the board, we are not attracting men and women, enough men and women into those subjects, so there's something across the board. But I think in particular for women as well, even those that get into those professions, we have to work even harder at keeping them in there because the environment's right, but also as they are the women who drop out of the workforce because of having children, we also need to, if we've invested all that time, effort and money in bringing women into the workplace, making them feel as though they belong, we really need to give that support. It makes business sense to do what we can to attract them back to work after having children. So whether that's supporting them in part-time working hours, whether it's just, again, making them feel comfortable in coming back to work after a career break. There's a lot more that I think we could do there, because I think as businesses, we are foolish if we don't do that.
Thank you very much for your answers there. If we could take another question from the floor. Yes, please.
Thank you. Excellent presentations, excellent insights. I look forward to the day when we're not having this discussion about females. I do think there are differences between male and female which organisations need to benefit from. But my question really is about, well, two comments further than that. One is research. Nancy mentioned that we need to do more research on the biological differences and how exposures affect that. We've seen, or at least I've seen, studies that have started to explore these issues, but there's a lot more that we need to do because the biology of women is obviously different and they're very sensitive time points, which we don't always understand. So that is certainly something that I think the health and safety people should try to capitalise on. The general experience with women is they have more tests more often for obvious reasons, and therefore we can use that information to understand risks in the future. This is kind of like the exposome and exposomics, which was now being developed a lot further. But my question at the end of this is there a difference between leaders and managers as far as females are concerned?
Yeah, great question. I thought you were going to give me a research question. So yeah, I have some information for you here with regards to leadership and diversity. So in general, companies where they have gender balance and diversity is a value and embraced, they generally have improved operational and financial performance. And that would be, accountable to the leadership establishing those values and embracing them throughout the organization. Diverse teams, they're more productive, they have safer work practices. Diversity promotes creativity and strategic resilience, and it actually helps companies to innovate better. And so I think that you could include leadership in that. I also want to add that investors, they want to partner with companies that help them achieve their environmental, social, and governance objectives. And that would include diversity and inclusion. So I think those decisions to shape organizations, to place values on that, it sits with leadership and it would be reflected in leadership. So hopefully that helps.
So I think that's a really interesting question. I did a master's degree in major program management, and part of the research I did in that was around female leadership in the context of major programs, I guess particularly sort of mega project, construction projects, that kind of thing. And I don't think there's necessarily a sort of true biological difference between male and female leadership or management. But what I think there is, probably in many cultures, is a learned behavioral way of turning up within organizations and groups as a woman. And I think, we could have a long conversation about why that behavior is different, but it does tend, I think, to mean that there is a gendered difference in behaviors. And what's observable, I think, is quite often the leadership style of women can be more collaborative, can be more keen to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and recognized before decisions are made, and feel perhaps less pressure on us actually sometimes to be that individual sort of hero type leader. And I think that can have real advantages just generally in the workplace. I don't think it is a trait that only women can exhibit, by the way. I think it's in many ways a choice, but I think it is culturally something that perhaps women feel more comfortable and natural in that space. But in particular in safety, and this picks up on something Mohammed said about the sort of the wider psychosocial safety in major hazard type industries, that importance of making sure your whole workforce feels empowered to speak up, feels that they will tell the truth when asked, why are they falling behind schedule, they won't try and hide things that are going wrong, won't try and mask mistakes for fear of some kind of reprisal. I think if you can create that culture, you are more likely to get your workforce to uncover for you risks and issues with some of the various sort of hazardous materials that many of us work with. And so I think there is, I suppose I'd reverse your question to say it's not necessarily that there is difference or value in the leadership of women, but leadership from a feminine perspective can be really helpful, whether it's exercised by women or by men who perhaps need to try rather harder to learn to collaborate and work together in that kind of way.
And I was just going to come in and say about leadership. I think there are lots of different types of leadership, and depending on the situation you are faced with as a leader, whether you're a man or a woman, you may adopt different styles depending on the situation that you're facing. And so I think there is no one set way, whether you are a man or a woman, to lead. However, I think going back to what was said earlier, I think having a diverse range of people on or a diverse range of leaders, men and women, diverse in their approach, the different styles they've got, it just leads, I think, to more of a debate at that leadership level about what is, for any business, what is the right leadership style we should have in this situation that we've got. So I think it just means the melting pot of ideas is greater when you've got a diverse group. So I don't think it is about women having a perfect leadership style or men. I think it's about bringing all views into the debate. Thanks.
So I'll be telling you a personal story. It might answer your question and it might not, but then I'll be topping that up with something that I'll be sharing as an experience or something that we do in Aramco. So basically we used to do, we continue to do safety letters, and this is something that we do and publish for all company employees. And the way we used to write it, basically by engineers to engineers. So we speak engineering language, and it tends to be so technical that if anybody else who doesn't have a degree in engineering wouldn't be able to understand it. And our intention was basically this is for everybody. We want, especially people who are we want the frontline team to read it, understand it, and then basically maximize their learning out of that specific issue or a situation that we want to tackle. So I used to write, I used to work in investigation, and then we basically generate those safety letters and safety bulletins, and then we used to write it in a specific style and a specific language, and then we've done that. We've used to do that for quite some time, and we carried out the same style for so many years. One time, that specific letter used to go through the routing approval, and then it goes to one of our writers and editors in one of the groups in the company, and then used to get done by an engineer, or by a male editor and writer. And then one day it landed on the hands of a female editor and writer, and then we used to avoid sending stuff to that female editor and writer because she changed stuff. Then I said, let me approach this from an open mind, perspective, and then hear what she's trying to say. And then she said something. She said, "It's not human. It looks like a machine wrote that down, and it's way too technical. So if you want," and she asked me, "I was like, who's your targeted audience?" And I said, basically frontline teams. And then I said, well, they want to be able to understand what you wrote. And I said, okay, so what can we do? And so she said, I'll help you out. So she toned down the message. She asked me a couple of questions. It was a little bit, it carried out a little bit more work in comparison to other bulletins. But then we ended up with an impactful message, something that others can understand, people in the front, operators, technicians, and people who doesn't hold an engineering degree can understand what are we trying to say. So, and the same goes for leadership. And I think one of the things that we do in leadership is basically zooming in, understanding the style of leaders. And one of the programs that we have in the company, and it starts from frontline leaders all the way to executives, is something called Leadership Readiness Assessment, where we assess leaders, we assess their readiness before assuming a specific role, a leadership role in the company. And the same goes for all genders. And basically, it tells you what leadership style you have. And everybody has its own unique leadership style. There are mainly common leadership styles among the workforce and everybody, especially in the oil and gas industry. But it will tell you what are your strengths, what are your areas for improvement, what's your style, what you need to be mindful of. So I think understanding basically the core things of leadership, not basically having that, or basically being concerned about the biological differences rather than understanding things from psychological perspective, understanding the differences between humans, between individuals is actually a key thing, moving things forward.
Thank you very much to the panel for those answers. We've probably got time for one more question from the floor, if anybody else has any. Yes, please.
Good afternoon. I'll start by making a comment. I really appreciate the presentation from the panelists. I learned a lot, but I do have a question coming from the African region and from a developing country which has got a strong cultural beliefs. When we consider the issue of gender empowerment, there are a lot of hindrances or opposition from our cultural beliefs. So I would like to know from the panelists, specifically from Saudi Arabia. I believe they are one country that has got strong cultural beliefs as to how did you manage to go about coming up, how did you manage to go against that opposition from your organization? How did you manage to have female or to promote female leadership, because maybe in our countries, we find that we do have those gender policies and the programs, they are there in place, but when it comes to practice, we don't get where we want to get. So I just want to find out, how did you manage to overcome the barrier of strong cultural beliefs? And because I heard that from your presentation that within your organization, you have KPIs and so on that promote gender empowerment. We do have programs like Gender in Energy. We have the STEM programs and everything, but we still have that challenge. For example, I can just say I have been working for government. I work for the Ministry of Labor. I have been the only female in that department for more than 10 years. And we haven't been, we've had times when we had to hire people, but then the people who were hired were only males, but there were female applicants, and I'm not sure whether they did not meet the required standard or it is because they are female. And I have also had maybe the experience of not being able to get a job because I am a female. So I would like to learn more, just to find out from you guys how you have been able to manage to overcome this issue. And I just appreciate from Nancy, she said she is there to support. So I would like to contact her for that. Thank you.
So, yeah, sure. So the quick answer to your question is basically the solution comes from top down. So if top leaders are not in support of this, you wouldn't see solutions. But if the top leaders are basically driving this and enforcing it, you will definitely see solutions and solutions coming out fast. If we're 10 years, if we go back in time, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, I'll be joining you asking the same question. But nowadays, we started, and actually that percentage or that KPI is not a KPI that the company has been set. There's also a government KPI, a government set KPI, or a KPI set by the government, not only for the oil and gas industry, but the same goes for different jobs and different disciplines, and basically mandating that change or enforcing that change to happen. And I think, and the same, I think if I understand from your question, I sensed is that in every country that is facing this specific situation, I think the community and people are ready for that change. What needs to be done is basically things to come from the government, things to come from top leaders, and the support to get, and the support that needs to be coming from those top leaders in order for that change to happen. So this is basically the quick answer to your question.
Oh, it's a great question, and we actually kind of said that while you were asking it. So it's a complicated question because it's a cultural question, right? And cultures do not change quickly. So I will give you the history just very briefly with regards to mining. Mining centuries ago was very much a family-based business, and women were very active both underground and on surface and doing all kinds of work. And it was actually in the UK, and my colleagues here might be able to help me out with the date, but I think it was the late 1700s, early 1800s, the Mines and Collieries Act came out, and it restricted women from working in mines and specifically going underground. And this really removed a lot of economic empowerment from women. And the ILO actually, at some point, and this is the date I'm not sure about, but they actually aligned with that restriction. And across the globe, we saw these family-based businesses, women being removed from it, and then a real difference in the organization of mining and who was doing mining. The ILO reversed that decision at some point. I think it may have been as late as the 1970s, and they acknowledged that it's one of the most discriminatory pieces of legislation that has ever been passed with regards to workplaces. And yet today we still see, and I think the most recent data is like around 2020 or 2021, there's still 60 countries where women are not permitted to do underground mining, and it's largely in the sub-Saharan region. And so it's a cultural thing. Cultures change slowly. And what we are seeing is that mining sectoral associations are coming out and speaking out against this and are in support of diversity and women in mining. And certainly, I encourage you to look, if you're interested, at that intergovernmental report, Women in the Mine of the Future. It's very good. It gives a history. The third report will provide strategies to overcome the barriers that they've identified.
So, I mean, I also think it was a great question, and I wouldn't want to underestimate for a moment how very difficult it must be to work and indeed to live in a country where that culture still predominates. As my colleague here has said, I think without real determination at the very top of a country, change, and certainly fast change, is incredibly difficult, potentially not possible. But I suppose on a positive side, what we see around the world is there's some real economic pressure actually to make full use of the whole of the potential workforce, the whole of the talent available to countries and organizations as a sort of an economic pressure. And that includes, of course, women as part of the workforce. And when we see the wider aging population, if you further restrict your working age population to mean your male working age population, there's an even greater burden placed on supporting the elder community as they come through to the end of their working life. So I think there are global pressures which sort of push everyone towards thinking about those diversity and inclusion type initiatives from a selfish in terms of the wider economy, as well as for the benefit of women who will support from it. But I suppose the hopeful thing is we see both that change can happen rapidly, as a colleague here has been describing in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, as well as slowly. But I mean, there can be some profound changes. Talking about that legislation passed in the UK, I suspect the people passing it would have been men coming from probably fairly paternalistic view of a need to protect women, and seeing the atrocious conditions in the mines in the UK at that time, rather than thinking, let's improve the conditions in the mines, was saying, well, we better not have our women folk here. Whereas, of course, a better approach would have been to improve them for all. But I mean, even in the UK, as late as the late 70s, in some positions in government, you had to resign when you married, because obviously a married woman's job was to go home and have children and stay there and look after them and her husband. It was obviously increasingly rare by the 70s, but it persisted through until then. And one thing we have actually on a poster in our main laboratory in Buxton in the Midlands in England is a quote from an early chief inspector of factories, the predecessor of Jane's role of our people now working as health and safety inspectors, and asked whether or not he saw a time when women would become factory inspectors. He said he thought not. He thought that it would be against the delicate and feminine nature of a woman to undertake such work as a factory inspector. Now, it took 100 or so years, but we did manage to change that. And I think we probably have more female inspectors these days than we do male. So I suppose what I would say is I have a huge amount of sympathy. It must be incredibly challenging. As others have said on the panel, culture is probably the single hardest thing to shift. But I think there's hope because you can see that other nations, other countries are moving fast, but it does need that leadership from the top. And without that, I think change will only be incremental and probably much slower than we would want to see.
Yeah, and just to add, it's probably around 100 years ago that in the UK women got the vote, but it took a lot longer to get from that position to where we might be today in terms of our voice there. And if any of us had the answer to your question, then that would be great, wouldn't it? But there is no easy answer. What I would say, though, is we all thought it was a great question because I think, in particular, I think all of us felt for you when you described the position you're in. All I would say is there's always got to be somebody there who's the first. So the fact that you, in the 10 years, you're the one female in your department, what I would say is, one, well done, not from a patronising point of view, because I can see how difficult that would be. So I think probably your question has really probably hit me the most in making me feel how lucky I am in the situation I'm in. But just to say, we're there with you, and if there's anything certainly that and I'm sure any of the panel members can do just to show that support to you in your role as one person, then I'm more, I think I would want to do that because actually there is no silver bullet to that question, I don't think, but we can give you our support.
So one final thing to add is basically, and this goes for all organizations and all governments, is to worry about and be concerned about the qualifications when appointing a certain individual to a specific job rather than worrying about the gender. And a good example is if you ever get the chance to visit the EXPO and visit not the pavilion, but there was an accompanying exhibition. I believe it was titled Explore Saudi Soul of Arabia. So that exhibition lasted for 7 days. Unfortunately, it was concluded, I think, 2 days ago. But that exhibition was led by a female Saudi leader.
Okay, thank you very much to the panel there. We're out of time now, but thank you very much for your insightful comments, and thank you very much to those of you who've asked questions today. I hope you found this useful and interesting.